today with Bill Carriage, and Bill is the Associate Director of the Business Partner Relations at CSL Behring. And so just wanted to get right into kind of what we're doing. We're talking about the challenges of change and introducing new technology around budgeting. So I wanted to frame up our conversation today. So we're here to talk about the challenges and embracing change and going through change in difficult times. And to really talk about that, I wanted to share this curve. It's called the Kubler-Ross curve, and it's really about the emotional changes that anyone goes through when they're going through change. And it's really, it's the reactions that people have. And so it really starts off this acknowledgement that the status quo is no longer really serving you. So that's the only reason that area is circled, because that's kind of the beginning of the story. So that's just our frame. So I want to ask Bill, kind of what prompted you to say, you know, the status quo wasn't working any longer?
So, I mean, for me, the status quo, I mean, initially when it started my career, as I had finished from school, I was a film major, ironically enough, and what I saw in California and the whole idea of what the film industry was looking like, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. So then I did kind of exactly what we're talking about here. It's you jump into something new and you take a chance, and it's kind of a part of development. You explore these new ideas thinking it's great, and then you take one step into it and you realize, oh my God, what have I done? And then you have to kind of have to power through that. So from kind of film school, I went into restaurant ownership, and I owned franchises of a sandwich franchise. I don't know if I'm allowed to even say their name, so I won't. But you know, I moved to the Philadelphia area and I opened 4 of those, and again, it was change. It was a new area, new state, new friends, new kind of everything. So you're faced with the decision or the thought after you've done something like this is, did I make the right decision? Is it the right move? All these things are working against me. Why do I keep going? And once you start to get through that a little bit more, you start to explore your other opportunities, and you realize through the process, but even though it's grueling, there becomes acceptance. And once you get to that acceptance point, you kind of look back and you realize, I made the right decision. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you go down a path and you realize it doesn't work out, or it's not the career you thought it would be. And that's where I kind of landed within pharma, was along those lines. I had sold my business successfully, which in the restaurant business means you get out without owing any money, which is great. My wife was pregnant at the time and I was unemployed. So perfect timing. But again, just I was looking at any opportunity I could get into a career. My college roommate, best man at my wedding, said, hey, there's a job opening in business operations and pharmaceuticals. And I spent the first year, well, first I was in denial that there's no way I'm going to get the job. I was terrible at chemistry. Math was good. Biology, forget it. But I applied, and I guess he had pulled some strings. So I probably owe this career to him, but I'll never say that to him. And, you know, I spent the first year with the fear that they were going to find out that I was bad at chemistry, or that I shouldn't belong in the pharmaceutical industry. And it kind of it goes through every stage of this. Is, did I make the right decision? You know, to where now it's, I made the right decision. The people who hired me made the right decision. I hope that they feel that way. But when you get into software and you get into platforms like this, again, it's met with everything along these lines: denial, resistance. People want to poke holes in it just to poke holes in it, which in theory is a bad thing, but it's really productive, because it identifies gaps, and as you identify gaps and you begin to close those gaps, the exploration gets to start. And as more and more people organically get on board with it, you start to realize the more and more capabilities. So when it comes to introducing new technology, it's not easy, but you get there.
So what prompted you? So when you got into that role, I mean, what an interesting path that you, number one, and I'm going to let you in on a secret. I was a chemistry major, but even after being a chemist, I moved out of the lab. So, and because I liked more, I liked some different things. And I'm guessing a lot of people aren't really great at chemistry in the pharma industry. So I think you're in good company. I think you're safe there. But as you thought about kind of business operations and the roles that we were taking on, what prompted you? Like, what were the challenges you were facing in your role that made you think about, there might be a different way to do things?
So when I joined CSL, a lot of things were still done kind of in silos per se. There was still a lot of cross-functional support, but there were a lot of decisions that were being made in that role, in a forecasting and budgeting role, based off of one or two or three study assumptions within the same indication, but that was done years ago, and it wasn't a great, necessarily a great model, in my opinion, to mirror these other studies that might have a similar patient count, but it's a totally different indication. And just because it happened over here doesn't mean it's going to happen over there. And so I think that for me was the first red flag is, there's, again, naive me thinking I'm working with a bunch of scientists in this industry, making operational decisions. They're really smart people. Why are we basing off this? And it's just how it had always been done. So me coming from a career of asking people if they want chips and a drink to kind of the pharmaceutical industry, we're saying, well, why not do it differently? Why can't we change how we've done it? Yes, we've done it this way for a long time, but is it the only way? And that started to gain a lot of traction with people internally. So it just, once I started looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, we have our enrollment curves from this system and we think we know how long it's going to take to enroll a study. Can we at least map out based on enrollment cost expectation? Different services have different time points as to which you're going to incur expense. You build a database, you're going to have a lot more expense in the front versus the back of the study, in theory, versus statistics is probably the opposite. So why do we flatline it across the board, or how do we method, what's the method to our madness? And what I kept running into is that there wasn't a method, there wasn't a consistent approach. So when you get into thinking about studies and the different ways they're created, the biggest thing I heard was, well, where are we capturing these assumptions that we're forecasting? And it lived on someone's desktop that left the company because they won the lottery or something. And then you start recreating the wheel over and over and over again. So when came across this platform, this technology, it was, for me, it was very eye-opening that it does exist out there.
So that's a really great point. So just to kind of summarize that, then, you came in with fresh eyes, you asked questions around things that weren't making sense to you, and realized that, there really wasn't necessarily a good reason, and it wasn't anything that was necessarily sustainable. We're going to ask another poll question here. So let's go ahead and put up our second poll question. Great. And our poll question is around the duration. How long does it take to create a budget with your current technology or process? All right, and we're going to give folks just a minute to talk about that. Okay. And we're going to be moving in to kind of this next area. So I think the Bill did a really great job talking a bit about that denial and that resistance, in terms of his personal life. So he certainly had he's no stranger to change. I guess that's a great way to put it. He's personally lived that quite a bit. But it's different, I think, when you're trying to move a team through that. Before we get into that, can we check on our poll results? Great. So our poll results, wow. So our majority of folks are in the more than 3 weeks, but we do have several that are in the less than 1 week category as well. And then another significant group in the middle category of 1 to 3. So just, I think that's great insights and some information that will be helpful moving forward. So thinking about that and thinking about the challenges that you were experiencing, so Bill, you had already made that big change going into the pharma industry. You're a little bit concerned about not being, great at chemistry, but you were identifying things that, and opportunities for improvement. You were bringing in this technology. What sorts of fears and concerns were you experiencing either on your, for yourself, or were you hearing about from others?
So for me, I kind of learned quickly that trying to convince someone that there's a better way to do it, just say, and the way you're doing it doesn't working, or it works but it's inefficient, it never was met very well. So you almost have to take the initiative on yourself to say, will you allow me the opportunity to explore this on my own, and let me come back to you with how we can do it differently, show some efficiencies there. And that's where a lot of the legwork is at the beginning, or even throughout the getting people over the denial process. It's allow me to explore it. What's the worst that could happen? We're in the same spot we're in, and in some people's opinions, that was great. If people wanted it to be better, this was an opportunity for it. If people thought it was great and I had the opportunity to show them there was a better way, that enables, that allows us to change minds and direction. The reality of it is any job can be done better. The world changes, the globe changes daily, as we all know. So with the notion that we are operating in our highest, most efficient fashion, and that change isn't necessary is, in my opinion, somewhat foolish. But that doesn't mean it's easy to kind of adapt to this. So it really takes someone, a person, and myself in this situation to say, let me go out there and take all the risk. You're not going to be hurt from this at all. Just let me explore. The worst is we're going to end up right where we are, which the best is they essentially get credit for it. Well, maybe but the process gets better and they're a part of that process after adoption. So.
Great. So in this case, so do you have any advice then for other people who might be embarking on their own technology journey?
Technology journey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is identify gaps that currently exist in your current process. For us, it was, again, everything was living on Excel files and people's desktops, and we have this global financial system that we put things in, but we have limits there as to what we can put in there, and it's this somewhat archaic system, but I think most of them are. It limits you on what you can put in there. Sometimes your study refinements are overnight and they change by midday, and they change by the end of the day. By the time it takes to go and readjust a budget with these new assumptions, and then someone comes back to you with these new criteria or new scenarios, for lack of a better word, but you don't have the time to go out and recreate it because you're doing your day job. You already did the budget build, and we're in research, so study designs change at a moment's notice. So as the world changes, so we have to kind of keep evolving. So having a place that when you've understood your problem and you can identify what your problem is, then you start finding solutions, and you really have to show how this solution could help. Not that it's the answer, it's not the end all be all, but it's the effort to go forward and implement technology that will improve or allow people to do what they're supposed to be doing anyways, which isn't digging for files on people's computers.
But actually getting to the job that they want to do. That's good.
Well, that they were hired to do, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we've gone through this, very interesting year with COVID. Um, what were some of the unique things that you were facing with COVID, and trying to do things in a different way that you also had to address?
So I think, the silver lining with, and I use that loosely, the silver lining with COVID was that it really forced our company, as well as many in the industry, that simple things like working remote. We were never really a big remote company. We have remote employees, we have remote staff, but everybody still came to the office because there was this fear that infrastructure wasn't going to be able to support this way of working. And during a pandemic and this global shutdown, we didn't have a choice. And sometimes that is how change occurs. People are forced into a position where you can't do what you used to do, period. There's no option. So that's not always the best solution, but that to me is the silver lining of where this all came about. Was I was exploring this technology before COVID really even hit, and really starting to do the legwork and pounding the pavement and trying to get people to buy into this new way of thinking. Well, we're doing it this way, it works. We'll explore it more later. It's on we'll put on next year's, idea list or anything like that. And then you get something like a pandemic, and what was working, you can't do it anymore. It just doesn't. You can't go to someone's desk. You can't go catch up with them at the water cooler. You can't. So it really forced a lot of change, which was, in my opinion, it's good. It was good change. It forced organizations to realize where their gaps were, where their immediate needs were, versus where they thought their immediate needs were. And that's kind of where this technology for me was I was able to leverage it and say, if you have ideas that you want to send over, or different scenarios, you can send them to me and I can rebuild them quickly and get them back to you quickly in real time. You're not chasing people down. So
What a great,
that's kind of how it's happened.
Thank goodness that you were forward thinking. I mean, that speaks to you. I mean, good credit to you.
I wasn't forward thinking in that mindset. It was just inevitably things changed. You can't be stagnant, or else that's exactly it. It's stagnant.
So I just wanted to shift a little bit. So we're not through the pandemic quite yet, but I think we can see, maybe a little bit of hope at the end of the tunnel. But I did want to have you talk a little bit to where you are now, with your job, with your organization, and kind of with where you've grown your process and your technology.
Yeah, so over the last year, obviously the need for technology has been prevalent. Connecting with people virtually is more than, I think it was more accessible than everybody thought was possible. We have colleagues all over the world that we never video chat. I can't tell you the last time I hopped on a call without a video chat. I don't wear a sport coat every time, but for this occasion I dressed up. But it's allowed, the proof's kind of in the pudding. It started off with, hey, can I build a couple scenarios in this magical tool that you have? It's not magical. It's driven off of benchmark data. It's driven off of algorithms. It helps us assess what we're buying, why we're buying it, how we're buying it. It takes your old process that you thought was perfect, or it was close to perfect, and it really challenges those assumptions. And in some areas, it worked well. In other areas, we had leadership going back to individuals saying, so why is your number so much higher than what this is putting out? And there's this blind faith that, and I'm sorry for any CROs that are on the call, that CROs are always going to give you the best price for, the most affordable price for you, and it's efficient. And we're all in the business of making money. I mean, we're not in charitable. Not all of us are in charitable organizations, so you can't fault somebody for that. for trying to go out and make a dollar. But this technology really allowed, once it started to gain traction, all of a sudden overnight leadership, and it might have hit the right person's desk, I'm not sure, but they said, if you want to have your study forecasted within a budget for the next fiscal year, so we're doing our budget cycle, everything has to run through this tool, everything. And me being an N of one, that was a learning curve. And the tools definitely helps. It's a great product. It still has room for improvement, as we all do. And I think that's the best part about it, is just the support that we get. If we have questions, they're answered immediately. If we have suggestions, they want to talk about it. If we see something that, it's just a very interactive approach. And I think this environment that we're in now is what forced that. It's easy for anybody to get on a call and talk face to face versus setting up a meeting, going to lunch, and everything else. It's a much more direct approach. So it really catapulted this technology that took about a year just to convince people to really dig in and look at, to all of a sudden 3 or 4 months later, they want everybody to use it, soup to nuts. And it's like being thrown into the deep end. So it was a good experience. It came on fast. We looked at our studies differently. We looked at how we forecasted differently. We looked at challenging our assumptions. Not all studies are the same. And it goes back to the original problem I had at the beginning. If not all studies are the same, then why are we all basing it off of the same study? So
exactly. I mean, that's amazing. And I'm just gonna, my understanding is that you got a promotion during this whole process, and congratulations on that. And
thank you.
I mean, the fact that you're able to do something in a much shorter time frame, I mean, it really allows people to get on with the importance of clinical research. So way to go. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And it really started as kind of your grassroots approach, kind of this, you kind of took this, the whole, just instead of involving everyone, it was showing them, which is kind of a different approach. Sometimes it's always pulling people in for a pilot. Sometimes it's, there's different methods for change, but, definitely what I heard was taking the risk off of individuals, and you kind of taking it on more of yourself in a way that you could just show the output and allow that to gain traction in the organization. Great.
Yeah, and I think it was kind of imperative to understanding the technology and understanding what levers over here trigger this expense over there. And a lot of people were asking for access to it, and they could have had access to it. That wasn't an issue, but it becomes a garbage in, garbage out. So if you want to put in minimal assumptions, the range at which you could get your final answer could be so big. So having more control as to what assumptions are being captured and understanding the intricacies of it really helped drive it forward, because we can say, are you sure that you think you're going to have this many CRF pages? I've looked at a schedule of assessments. It doesn't look like you should have that many. Well, we were basing it off of this study that we did over here in another indication. So it starts to drive that conversation of education and saying, it's great that you think that, but let's go back to what truly drives this, and why do you think it's more than what it could be or is. So it wasn't just a tool that helped forecast and budget. It helped drive conversation and break down barriers to challenge assumptions and let people have the opportunity to defend their assumptions. And I think that was a very powerful part of implementing this.
Wow. That is great, and it really again speaks to your insight into standardization. I mean, it's hard to compare budgets and to really understand value if you don't use consistency in how you're collecting that information in the system. Yeah. So I think we're about ready to head into our last poll. And, Bill, what a great story that you have. And, I think it'd be great. I've certainly learned a lot just chatting with you. And we really appreciate the time you've had with us today. Our poll is open now. What's blocking you from implementing technology? Process is burdensome. We don't have a sponsor. The return on investment is unclear, or there's no budget. I'm nervous about the impact on my team or my job. And then we'll have a few minutes for a Q&A as well. So please go ahead and respond to the poll. And if you have any questions for Bill or for me, feel free to add those questions in the chat box. Okay, how are we doing with that? Okay, so it looks like in most cases that the return on investment is unclear, or there's little or no budget. And then the next piece is around the process being burdensome. So some interesting things. I think Bill, you might have something to say about that, the return on investment, or the process being burdensome.
Yeah. I mean, it is burdensome. I mean, the setting up any new technologies it can be burdensome, and that's change. In my opinion, that's change in general. That's a part that makes it effective. That's a part that makes it worth something, in my opinion. It doesn't always have to be burdensome, but it's burdensome isn't bad. I mean, my opinion, burdensome could mean that you're passionate about it and it's a daunting task but at the same token, if you want something to get better, it's gonna require work and effort. I can relate to the ROI being unclear and little to no budget. What I've expressed to people when we're looking at any sort of vendor or technology services, nobody wants to give you anything for free, and they shouldn't have to. If it's good technology, it's standing on its own. But the opportunity to explore one study, explore a build in a sandbox, work with technology, say, I'll give you what I would normally give somebody and walk me through how it's set up in a live system, not a demo, not, something that's pre-canned. I want to see the gaps. I want to see, and walk through that and take the time and investment there. So the return on investment sometimes isn't clear at the beginning, but really holistically understanding where the gaps are within your organization and how a piece of technology could, even if it's time is money. Everybody's talking about robotic process automation, and that's another area that I think is worth exploring, because if you can give back time or get back time to go do what you were hired to do, want to do, that's worth more than it being burdensome, so.
Great point. I appreciate that, Bill, very much. Wow, this has been really insightful. Appreciate your time. We're going to move into some Q&A time. There is one question that's come in. Have you ever had technology that you couldn't implement and make it through that change curve?
Yeah, I think, there's always going to be technology that at the surface level is great, that you think it's going to be a wave and it's going to change how we do things and it's going to be great. But there are certain aspects out of your vision or out of your control that you maybe didn't think about. Access to patient data, access to a financial system that has all these security measures that the global SOP is, we're not changing it, we haven't changed it in years, and you start to get, the higher up you get to try and make change, it becomes harder, it becomes more of a challenge, but there's usually a good reason for why things aren't changed. A lot of it is security, and just they want to keep the doors closed on some of those things, because if they open it for one group, then another group's going to come and ask for it. And that's part of the, for me, you know, going from being a business owner where what I said kind of went, to working in an industry where there are conversations that we're not aware of, that, and you kind of have to take it at face value and say, you know, and trust that they're telling you the truth, that there's nothing we can do about it this time. And you either table it, not necessarily give up on it, but you table it and you maybe explore it in a month or a year. It took me a while to get this going, you know, on our side of the business, but it was primarily because it was low on other people's priority lists. It wasn't until they started realizing the gaps that they were like, okay, we might need this. And you know, then you go through the rigor of making sure it fits within your infrastructure, within your system. So it's things like that that can kind of get in the way, but there's usually some sort of happy medium that you can gain something out of it.
Okay. So, Bill, we had another question come in asking for a little bit more around the return on investment. So did you do any sort of financial analysis or time analysis?
Yeah, so when historically what we were doing when we were building budgets, we were building them based off of a former study where we were relying on our partners in the CRO space, and we kind of trusted it. Not that it wasn't trustworthy, but what we're giving our CROs to bid back for us was nothing. And of course they want to, if you're a business and you have an opportunity to put a bid on a project, why not give it your best guess and look at it? What happens is that turns into gold. That turns into like that. All right, this is the budget. This is what, and you kind of have to take a step back and say, well, what did we really provide them to come up with this figure? Not that it's wrong, but it could be double that, it could be half that. And so there's that component of going back and forth with the vendor. What's nice about this tool is, again, challenging your assumptions at the beginning of a study down to and I always go back to this, you know, defaulting to how long it takes on average to review a CRF page. Something that people don't necessarily always think about, but that translates into, you know, how complex are you building a page? How much source data verification are you doing at the site? All those things add up to time, and time is what drive the cost, because it's usually someone going on site or someone looking at it through a system. If it's 0.17 of an hour and it's versus, which is 10 minutes, or 0.9 of an hour, which is 5 minutes, but you extrapolate that off to how many CRF pages there are total, you could have been overpaying and not know it, because this is what you've always paid. And this is really where the driving of the analysis, the conversation within our internal teams is, because you have a preferred provider, they work great for you, and everybody's happy. They're happy because they're making 50% margins. We're happy because we're getting great service, and our patients, you know, could we get that same service for 40% margins or 30, 20? You know, we look at this tool and we say, it's not necessarily you get your money back right away, but it's a cost avoidance for the future state. So that's kind of a big part of it.
Okay. So we do have another question. Who in your organization manages inputting assumptions into the tool?
Currently, it's myself and one other person.
Okay.
So we put out a guidance document to say, here's the minimum level of assumptions we need. And then once we get the assumptions, we plug it in. If someone comes to us with a full set of assumptions, and it's not a huge list, it fits on one page, we can have it built in the system in 15 minutes. I mean, it's really quickly, and once it's built, if someone wants to come back and change it, it is as simple as copying the scenario to a new scenario, changing the name to like updated date, patient count, site count, countries, whatever. And you can tweak that adjustment. And not only do you have your original one, you have the new one with everything. You have your dollar figures, you have your, assuming that's the only assumption that changed. If you want to go and change another, there were studies that I built it 22 times, and it was different enrollment rates, different number of sites, different countries, because this country had activation that took 150 days versus 110, and that pushed out last patient out, which then had a big problem. So it helps, getting these assumptions at the beginning, being able to put it in the system in real time. You're not waiting for a vendor to get back to you with your estimate, because they're sending it through several people to figure out, does this make sense? They're doing what this tool does in, effectively, once you hit submit, it turns it all around in a minute. But again, it goes back to how good are the assumptions at the beginning. I've gotten requests that were 2 sentences with no patient count, sites, no countries, no enrollment period, and they think that they can plug it in and it's going to tell them how much the study is going to cost. That requires a little bit more art, a little more digging, a little bit more research. So if the teams are good about getting all the assumptions before getting it built, 15 minutes tops.
Wow.
You're not waiting days or weeks to hear back from a vendor when leadership comes to you and say, so what does it look like now? It can happen that fast, and you can, even better, you can compare your oldest scenario to your new scenario, similar to how the RFPs and RFIs work, and it is column 1, column 2, column 3 is the variance. So you can articulate what changed based on the variables you changed and how much. I mean, it really, and it's instant and it's reportable, and you can show, I know that you think you made this change over here, but it affected everything else over here that you have no idea about, but that's what this change does. So it drives that part of the conversation.
That's great. So we have another question that came in. I think that's well, I think it really makes you much more informed about the requests being made or thinking about your study designs in ways that you wouldn't know in the past for maybe a couple of weeks, or until you got a ballpark back from your provider. We have a question asking, in general, for larger therapeutic areas, there's maybe a lot more data for some benchmarking purposes. Have you seen similar results when creating budgets for rare or for orphan diseases with limited data? Or what's been your experience there?
Yeah, so that for me, that's kind of the nice thing about this tool, is it is somewhat agnostic to the size of a trial. All of our diseases are rare diseases, but when you break down the tasks at hand that you're reviewing, like, again, CRF pages, it's a database build. If you're looking at it from a large trial or a small trial, it all comes down to, what are we asking a patient to go through on a visit? How many lab results are they going to have to get done? How many assessments? Each of those things equate to CRF pages that have to be reviewed or cleaned. So you have to look at the organization and say, are we doing risk-based monitoring, or is it 100%? And how much in person, how much not in person? Every one of these things is an adjustable field within this tool. So it again, there are defaults, so it will spit out a number. But when you're looking at it from rare disease or large trials, it's less focused on that and more focused on just, I don't want to say algorithms, but it's benchmarks, what they've seen. Where we do get into some cost differences, is things that are more complicated, like in rare disease, like medical monitoring. If we need someone on 24/7, the default rate might be half of what our rate is. But that's not to say it's wrong. It's to say that we should be looking at these a little bit closer. And maybe they think medical monitoring is going to be supporting a site 1 hour a week versus 25 minutes. And you start thinking about rare diseases and you say, my enrollment's not going to be 20 patients per site per month. It's going to be 1.5. So if I have 1.5 patients per month, based on the number of patients, why am I having 3 interim monitoring visits that day or that month for 1.5 patients?
Yeah.
So you can't take it at face value. This is where the evolution of understanding how the tool kind of works. This is the burdensome part, is you throw out a number to somebody who knows the numbers and they look at you like, why would you think that's okay? And it was educational for me. But you have to look at those underlying assumptions. And rare disease, large trials, it's all driven by, for this tool, it's driven by hourly rates, which you can adjust. It's driven by units, whether it's minutes, time of hours, or whatever. And it's all adjustable in it. And the nice thing is once you make the adjustment, you click save, it reforecasts everything based on the timing is when this is going to happen on a trial. Lowers your IMVs, it lowers your pass-through costs. It does all that extra work where if you're doing it in an Excel file and you screw up one formula, you might screw up the entire sheet and you're spending 8 hours trying to figure out what formula you accidentally typed an equal sign into.
Been there, done that. Bill, we really appreciate your time here today. That was our last question that we have time for. We definitely appreciate the interaction today. If you have more questions for Bill or for others, and I think Bill, had offered earlier to even talk to anyone who's interested in learning more, you can send those directly to us at our website, strategiconpharma.com. And we just want to thank you all for your attention today, for the great conversation. Bill, thank you so much for sharing your insights. And we appreciate the great audience and interaction today. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.